Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters temporary studio. Welcome to the show. So we finally have the fifth and final Dominus. I believe the other ones that were leaked are now officially confirmed to be real. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if I'm incorrect on that. Regardless, Tekuthal Inquiry Dominus is a card that, well, I definitely did not expect to see with the effect that it has. This is a very, very powerful card, both as a commander and in the 99 as well. A 3/5 Phyrexia horror that has flying that costs 2 blue, and it says if you would proliferate twice instead, which is just gross because proliferate is already an incredibly impactful and powerful thing. And this just says, hey, you know what? We should proliferate further. We should just make even more ridiculous things happen. Hey, you know what? +1/+1 counters. Great. Let's get more of those. Other types of counters. Let's get more of those too. You know, charge counters, whatever. -1/-1 counters on our opponent's creatures. Those as well. And especially, of course, poison counters as well, which are back in a big way in this set. So yeah. This commander has a ton of potential, especially for the right deck out there. There are plenty of popular decks built around, +1/+1 counters, plenty of popular decks built around super friends, with loyalty counters. There's a lot of different ways that you can use and abuse counters, and this commander utilizes a mechanic, or I should say supercharges a mechanic with proliferate that works incredibly well in those decks. And of course, I forgot to mention that last part too. 1, Phyrexia blue. Remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control. Put an indestructible counter on Tekuthal Inquiry Dominus. So this works in a very similar way to the other Dominuses, essentially, where you can get indestructible counter on it in one of different ways. Basically, I mean, utilizing either life or mana for that resource. This costs as little as just a singular mana. And then, of course, 3 counters. And actually, there are certain things that want counters removed as well. But yeah, it's pretty easy for you to just kind of justify removing a few counters, even if they're positive counters for you, to be able to get the indestructible counter on this, which you can then proliferate if you really want to. We'll talk about a scenario where that might really help you. Now, with these kinds of episodes, with these kinds of quick takes, I'm going to be breaking things down into budget buys, cards that, are less than $1 you should be considering if you want to build around this as a commander, and then price your picks cards that are above $1. So make sure you check out that link in the description below for the cards. With all that said, let's jump into it. So first up, some great budget buy considerations are cards like Tezzeret's Gambit, Throwing Bird, and Blighted Agent. Tezzeret's Gambit, yeah, draw 2 cards, then proliferate. Obviously, this makes it twice as good. I mean, you still just draw the 2 cards, but still, proliferating twice is absurd for this kind of a rate. And yeah, being able to just utilize these proliferate effects in bigger ways can be huge, especially when you have repeatable proliferate effects like we see with Throwing Bird, a 1/1 flyer, very low to the ground, deals combination to a player, proliferate. So yeah, every single turn, essentially, you can get to proliferate with this just by getting through on one opponent, and chances are pretty likely with the evasion with that flying, it's going to be able to do so. So it's doubling up its effectiveness thanks to this fantastic commander. And yeah, just even consider getting 1 singular counter on this. What happens then? This hits, proliferate twice. It's going to be a 3/3 next turn, then a 5/5, etc., etc., etc. And yeah, that's just considering its own proliferate effect, not others too. Speaking of which, Blighted Agent, oh my goodness. In fact, it's unblockable, 1/1, low to the ground, so you can very easily get a singular poison counter on an opponent very quickly, very easy with this. And by doing so, well, you're off to the races, because now if you proliferate, again, you're proliferating twice, getting 2 poison counters on that opponent, or, any opponents that have poison counters on them. And of course, if you just get counters on this again, those +1 counters, you can grow this very quickly. And yeah, again, you can take your opponents out very quickly if you want to go in a poison direction with this commander. And speaking of +1 counters, I mean, something like Chasm Skulker can already get a ton of counters on it very quickly. Whenever you draw a card, you get a counter on it. Then when it dies, you get X blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk, where X number of counters on it. So, of course, you're incentivized not just to make this into an absolutely destructible machine, but also, you're incentivized to get its power up, because when it does die, you can make an army out of just absolutely nowhere. So, yeah, proliferating twice with this can make it so that your draws essentially mean even more when you're able to proliferate on top of that. And speaking of getting counters on things, Opal Palace, hey, taps for colors, pay 1 into it, tap add 1 of any color mana pool into your commander's color identity. If you spend mana to cast your commander, it's going to enter with a number of counters on it equal to the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game. So our commander already starts off as a 3/5, but if we get a singular counter on it, things can get pretty absurd pretty quickly with the right build around it. Again, turning into a 4/5 flyer right away if it's the first time we cast it. Start proliferating, you're getting 2 counters on it every single time. Very easily becoming a 3-shot KO, eventually even a 2-shot KO, and maybe even a 1-shot KO. So yeah, this commander, who does not look like you could, utilize it in a Voltron way, definitely could be. Now, also consider other types of counters, though. Even on creatures like an Enclave Cryptologist, it has level up counters. So we just pay 1 in a blue, we level up, get a level counter on it, and eventually it goes, from 1 to 2 levels. You can actually tap and, basically loot, draw a card, discard a card. Level 3+ is draw a card. So all we need to do is proliferate once with this in play, once we have that first level counter on it, and then, yeah, we just get right to that draw card ability without having to invest a lot of mana into this resource. And speaking of mana investments, well, Replicating Ring can be a great investment for us. It's just a regular artifact, a regular mana rock. It seems like, 3 mana, taps for 1. Okay, that's not very efficient, but at the beginning of our upkeep, we get a night counter on it. Once it gets 8, we basically get 8 more mana rocks in play that can each tap for a singular color. And yeah, 8 would take a long time to get to, just waiting every single turn. But if we can start proliferating and again get 2 counters instead of just 1, we can do this in absolutely no time and get a massive mana advantage on our opponents. Speaking of advantage, we can also have an advantage on the battlefield with Ominous Seas. Whenever you draw a card, you get a foreshadow counter on it. Removing 8 counters from it, you get a Kraken, an 8/8. So yeah, we can very easily get to a lot of counters on this, make a Kraken army, and take our opponents out. Speaking of taking things out, well, our opponents aren't going to be able to take their things out very easily with Nesting Grounds in play. Task for colors, we can pay 1 to tap to remove a counter from a permanent we control onto another target permanent, activate as a sorcery. Again, our commander can very easily get an indestructible counter on it. Then we start proliferating, we can get more and more of those indestructible counters on it, and by doing so, we can utilize something like this to spread those around to other incredibly valuable permanents so that they are really hard to deal with. When it comes to lands in our pricier picks as well, yeah, Karn's Bastion is a great upgrade. Again, in a monocolor deck, sure, we can utilize some great utility lands like this. Test for colors, pay 4, tap, proliferate. And again, you're getting twice as much value out of this instead of it being, basically 4 mana for proliferate 1. It's 4 mana for proliferate 2. Speaking of which, Contagion Engine enters the battlefield to get a -1/-1 counter on each creature target player controls, which is lovely to set ourselves up to take an opponent's creatures out. But of course, on top of that, pay 4, tap, proliferate, then proliferate again. So we're going to be proliferating 4 times with this. So basically, yeah, 1 mana for each proliferate effect because our commander is going to be doubling these up. I mean, just with 1 activation, right? Not even considering anything else except those -1/-1 counters on that unlucky opponent's creatures. That is what, 5 -1/-1 counters in total? The original plus that activation plus the doubling. Yeah, they're not going to keep any of the creatures around for a little while. And of course, yeah, this can just be a great way to really speed things up with whatever plan we are going for, whether that's, our own counters build, whether that's poison, etc., or, we can make things even more ridiculous with this commander because, yes, Spark Double is, of course, in our color and enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except with an additional counter on it if it's a creature, and also it isn't legendary if the permanent is legendary, so, yeah, get an extra copy of our commander, double up our proliferation again, which can make it even more absurd, and of course, yeah, we get a counter on it, so, well, we can just, proliferate an absurd amount of times with this, massive creature now that also can just start building counters on it too. And a level up creature that can be incredibly impactful with a commander like this, Lighthouse Chronologist, a very low to the ground creature that is basically just a 1/3 that, well, essentially does nothing for a very long time, but with this kind of a commander, we can make it do something very, very gross, very, very quickly, level up for a singular blue mana, and that's kind of all you have to pay into this, actually, if you really want to, when it comes to, being able to utilize proliferate effects in a very effective way, because once we get to 7+ counters, at the beginning of each end step, if it's our not hard turn, we take an extra for this one. This is an absurd effect, one that is not game breaking, I wouldn't say, but very much game ending. Basically, okay, yeah, all my opponents, they're going to get, their turns, but I'm going to get an extra turn in between each of those turns. So our opponents are going to have absolutely no chance, especially if we can utilize something like Darksteel Reactor, which is a great card for a commander like this. It's indestructible, so it's hard to deal with. Of course, on top of that, beginning of our upkeep, we get a charge counter on it, and when it's got 20 more charge counters on it, we win the game. So that can end incredibly quickly. And yeah, again, by doubling up proliferation, we can do some crazy things. Speaking of which, yeah, Planeswalkers, you definitely going to want to consider some of those, especially ones with really powerful ultimates like, Karn Liberated, +4 target player exiles a card from their hand, -3 exile target permanent, -14 restart the game, leaving in exile all non-aura permanent cards, exile the Karn Liberator, then put those cards on the battlefield under your control. So basically, a game-ending ultimate that, again, you can get to really quickly with a deck built around proliferation with a fantastic commander like this. And of course, again, you could just make things even more absurd. Again, we've got a lot of great proliferate cards that we can utilize, a lot of great spells. Primarily, we can help us out in multiple ways with them. Instant source spells we cast cost 1 to cast. Whenever you cast an instant source spell, you get a charge counter on it. Then if there are 4 more charge counters on it, we can remove those counters and transform it. We don't even have to cast 4 spells, obviously, to get 4 charge counters on this. Very easy to do with proliferate effects. And of course, when it flips in Primal Wellspring, things can get really crazy. Tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. When that mana spell to cast an instant sorcery, you're automatically copying that spell. So yeah, again, those proliferate cards, those proliferate spells get even more impactful when we are doubling them up, which already doubled up with our commander. But yeah, I definitely did not expect to see a commander like this. I definitely did not expect to see, proliferating twice be the actual effect. I mean, I did expect to see a blue Dominus, obviously, and, being able to get an indestructible counter on it somehow. But yeah, proliferating twice is something I did not consider. The rumor going around the internet was, doubling up card draw. Sure, something like that, like a Teferi's Ageless Insight in a way. And that is kind of more so what I expected, but I am so happy to see something like this. I think this commander has a ton of potential. I mean, actually, the card itself has a ton of potential, both as a commander, I should say, and in the 99, of course, for, any kind of decks that want to utilize proliferate and a lot of those effects. I mean, Atraxa, hello. Make sure you consider this awesome card. And yeah, a quick reminder again that the card list link is going to be in the description below for all the cards I talked about in this episode. So if you do want to build around this as a commander, make sure you check that out. And with that, today's episode is coming to a close. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on it. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.